In Washington, ghost-like objects dart across the radar screen at the CAA Traffic Control Center at National Airport for several hours, traveling more than 100 miles an hour. Air Force jet fighters spend several hours chasing the objects plotted on the radar scope.
Something else is out there.
There's something else out there, okay.
Of all the banks and braes of bonny Scotland, none holds more fascination than the murky waters of Loch Ness.
Tell me, do you think there is life on other planets?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I suppose there would be.
No, he seems definite. You seem
Definitely.
definite about it. How do you see this life and where?
Oh, I've seen a flying saucer.
Blackwater Media presents Darkfall. Real-life encounters with the paranormal and the unexplained. I went to Europe by myself when I was 19. I had no idea what I was doing, but I wanted to go before life happened, like so many people told me when I asked them why they never traveled. I was only going to travel for a few weeks because I had very little money, but I ended up finding jobs here and there and was able to stay for almost a year. I went to Greece at one point and met a young woman who was my age, and we hit it off. She lived in Thessaloniki, but her family was from a small village near the border with Bulgaria. She hadn't gone to visit her grandmother in a while and thought it would be fun to go if I went with her. I jumped at the idea, and I thought it'd be cool to go to her village. It's very small. Only a few homes had running water or electricity, and only one person had a phone. Now, the people in this town were hardly friendly. They stared at me as if I was guilty of something. I thought it was a beautiful village, and I felt like I'd stepped back into the past. We were to sleep in her grandmother's old house, no electricity, one faucet, and an outhouse. Strangely, the old woman would gather seeds and dry them on the floor, so all the floors were covered in crunchy seeds, so every step was just the sound of crunching. But she lived there alone, so it didn't really matter. Our bedroom was upstairs. It had 2 twin beds and 2 windows, but the windows were boarded up completely. Most of the house was boarded up like that too. I thought it was strange. That night it was so dark we had to keep a candle lit. We went to bed early, or what was early for us, closed the door as we were told because of stray cats and snakes, and got in our beds, but ended up talking for a long time. I thought the village and the people were so interesting, and she was excited to talk about it with me. Finally, we started to drift off. She blew out the candle, and within a couple of minutes, we heard what sounded like crunching footsteps coming up the stairs. I froze, and I assumed she did too. I thought it was her grandmother checking up on us. The footsteps continued up to the door and stopped for a second or two just outside the door, and then continued into the room. Crunching footsteps until I could tell whatever it was standing in the middle of our room, as if it had just walked through the door. I said, "Did you hear that? Are you awake?" And she said yes and yelled out for her grandmother and said some things I didn't understand. She fumbled to light the candle again, and when it was all lit, we could see that no one was in the room except for us, and the door was still closed. We could hear her grandmother coming up the stairs quickly. She opened the door and asked what was going on. My friend told her, but she didn't believe us and looked at me like it was my fault. The old lady told us to stop being silly and go to sleep. The next day when we woke up, we went for a walk to look at the ruins just outside of the city. When we got there, a lot of things happened almost at once. First, we noticed a stillness. Then many animals started making loud noises, kind of screeching in their own ways. The sky got dark, and then one big, and I mean one goddamn big strong wind came through. Not in a straight line, it kind of swirled through in one big gust. And it was really loud too. Then it just passed, and things went back to normal, almost like nothing ever happened. When we got back to the village, it was a mess, like it was hit by a small tornado. Even at the house of my friend's grandmother, All of the seeds were blown off the floors. As we walked back into the village, people stared at me like it was my fault and were saying things to each other that I felt was about me. I told my friend what I was feeling about how everyone was staring and talking, and she said, "They are talking about you." She told me that they were saying that I brought something bad or evil to the village, and they didn't want me to stay. They said they'd never experienced a strange wind like that before. We did leave the next day, but I didn't believe I'd taken anything bad there. It took me years to understand, but later I realized that there might have been something attached to me, something the village didn't welcome.